The 2021 is a special year in Olympia's history. It marks the 100th anniversary of the American unknown soldier from World War I coming home for interment at Arlington National Cemetery at what is now known as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So throughout the year, we will be hosting programs, discussions, opening special exhibits, all as a way to commemorate this solemn occasion and to allow people to discuss what home means and what loss means, and reflect on the issues that were faced 100 years ago and how they are still relevant to our society and to our country today as a whole. So we're really excited to have with us one of our partners for the event, the ones really spearheading it, the Society of the Honor Guard Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, President Gavin. He is going to be sharing with you the history of the unknown soldier, information about the tomb, and the Sentinels who stand guard and stand watch. So enjoy. It's a great conversation. We're excited that you all are here. And then if you have any questions or questions come up during Gavin's presentation, please use the Q&A function. And then we will leave some time at the end as well to answer those. So Gavin, over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Alexis, and thank you for the Independence Seaport Museum for setting this up and allowing me to once again talk about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and the history in the centennial year. Working with the Independence Seaport Museum and the USS Olympia have been fantastic for the society, and it really ties everything together because of the ship's mission to bring home the unknown soldier in World War I. So I'm going to jump right in and share my PowerPoint, and hopefully everybody will get a chance to see that. There we go. All right. I am a retired Sergeant Major Gavin McIlvenna. I am the president of the Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The society itself is a nonprofit educational organization made up by current and former Tomb Guards, and one of our biggest missions is educating. And so we've got this type of free programs that are available throughout the year in either a virtual format or in person, depending on the restrictions of the time. And we talk about the history of the unknown soldier, where they came from, the selection process, and then a little bit about the regiment that currently has the duty to provide the Sentinels at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I always like starting off this photo of the picture in 1929 of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, because most people don't realize that this is what the actual tomb looked like not long after the internment in 1921. And there's a great photo of a cavalryman performing the duties of a sentinel at the tomb. So why did we decide to do a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier? At the end of the conflict in World War I, Great Britain and France decided that they would honor one of their unknown soldiers who died in battle and was unidentified in a very specific way to each nation. And they would bury them with honors at a specific location to represent all of the fallen and missing in that conflict. The Great Britain's unknown warrior was interred in the Westminster Abbey on November 11th, 1920. And France, who originally had come up with this idea, buried their unknown soldier underneath the Arc de Triomphe on the same date, November 11th, 1920. And there was a lot of talk about why America hadn't done the same thing. And Congressman Hamilton Fish of New York, he was a veteran of World War I. He had fought with the 369th Infantry Regiment, which is more commonly known as the Harlem Hillfighters, which was an all-Black and Puerto Rican unit out of New York. He took his wartime experience serving on the front lines in France and the idea and watching what France and Britain did, and drafted legislation that was approved in Congress in March of 1920. March of 1921. And that started the process for selecting our unknown soldiers. And in the way that the Army Quartermaster Corps was going to go about the task was they looked at both France and Great Britain and took elements of their process for each one and obviously made it very American. So there were 4 unknown candidates that were disinterred from American cemeteries in France. And then these candidates were brought at different times from different routes to one town, the town of Chalon-en-Champagne, on October 23rd. And they were in identical caskets. They had identical flags draped upon them. And immediately the French military put a guard of honor over these caskets throughout the night of October 23rd, 1921, until the ceremonies the next morning. And at odd hours of the night, a French officer would come in and would rotate the caskets and shift them about so that there's no possible way that anybody would know that a casket that was in the corner of the room had come from a certain cemetery, trying to make it as unanimous or unknown as possible. The next morning, Sergeant Edward F. Younger of the 50th Infantry was showing up for duty, and he thought he was just going to be a pallbearer when he was tasked with the making the identification for the World War I unknown soldier. And he was handed a spray of white roses from a local gentleman who actually had a rose shop there in the town. He was also a member of the city council and had lost his sons in the war. And he asked that these roses be used by Sergeant Younger to make the actual selection. And interestingly enough, working with the American Rose Society and Fabien Duché of the Duché Roserie in France, we've been able to identify, pretty sure, the variety of rose that was used by Sergeant Younger at that time. Well, either way, Sergeant Younger goes into the room, and there's these 4 caskets, and he walks around them about 3 times, trying to put his mind at ease and figure out how to make the selection for the World War I unknown soldier. And finally, the 3rd casket from the left kind of stopped him. And he said later on that he felt that he had served with this individual, and he was pulled towards him. And it's probably very true, because Sergeant Younger was a decorated veteran of World War I, having served in 3 out of the 4 different areas that candidates were chosen from. So the chances that he actually did serve next to this unknown soldier were probably pretty high. Well, Sergeant Younger makes a selection. He places the spray of white roses on top of the casket, and our unknown soldier had been selected. The 3 unknown candidates were then taken to the Meuse-Argonne Cemetery and buried with full military honors. The populace within the town, as well as dignitaries, paid their individual respects. And then the unknown soldier was carried to the train station, where he went from Chalons up to Paris, and spent the night at Paris under the watchful eye of U.S. Army soldiers, as well as a uniformed member of the American Legion. The next day, he makes his way to the coast, to the town of Le Havre, and there is taken from the train station to the port. And in the port is waiting the USS Olympia. The USS Olympia has a very long and distinguished history, starting with the Battle of Manila Bay in May of, I think it was 1898, where Admiral Dewey engaged the Spanish fleet. From that point, she's been involved in many conflicts and hotspots around the world during her entire career. And she was chosen to go to France to bring home the unknown soldier. And part of the detail that was assigned to the ship at the time was a special detachment of U.S. Marines. And these Marines were there to provide the honor watch over the casket. And this is a great photo of the USS Olympia at the dock in Le Havre. On the ship, you can see the sailors of the USS Olympia, as well as the band members, which is kind of right here in the center. The band actually came from the crew of the Olympia as well. And then here's that special detachment of Marines. And coming up to the gangway is the unknown soldier. Once the unknown soldier was placed aboard the USS Olympia, he was put onto the fantail. And again, another great photo from that time frame shows the Marines and the sailors as well, there at the fantail of the ship. The Marine captain who was in charge of the detail felt that the unknown soldier being on the fantail was a little exposed, and asked Captain Wyman if he could have the unknown soldier moved to a more secure location. And the Olympia, the holds were a little too small, so they couldn't move the casket into the interior of the ship, and the captain absolutely refused that the unknown soldier be placed into a cargo hold. So the best compromise they could come up with is, if you look in this photograph beneath the large American flag, right underneath it are these 2 funnels. And right in between those, eventually the casket is moved from the fantail right up to the center of that. And that's where the unknown soldier will stay during the entire trip. This was just prior to that. This is them coming out of the port area where you have sailors standing the watch over the unknown soldier. These Marines are school graduate Marines. They're very young, with the exception of their first sergeant and Captain Graves Erskine, who went on to become a general during World War II. They asked the ship's carpenter if a wooden box could be built and placed around the casket to keep it secure, because on top of the casket were the flowers that Sergeant Younger used, as well as other flowers and floral decorations that were presented to the unknown soldier. And once they put it up into that place, then they lashed it all to the deck. And the Marines at the time decided, well, if the unknown soldier is going to be lashed to the outside of the deck, then we're going to be lashed to the deck as well. And this proved to be very prudent, because as the Olympia was making its way across the Atlantic in the wintertime, they came across the remnants of 2 hurricanes that had just rolled through the United States. And as they went through this, there was a serious question of whether or not the ship would be able to complete its mission, whether staying afloat or lose the unknown soldier. At one point, the captain called the crew that was not on duty down into the galley area, and he asked a chaplain to make say a prayer for safe passage to the United States and completion of the mission. Well, on November 9th, 1921, the USS Olympia does make it across the Atlantic and arrives at the Naval Yard in Washington, D.C. And this is another great photo provided by the historians there at the USS Olympia of the unknown soldier being carried down the gangway onto U.S. soil. And it was from this point that the unknown soldier began a process that was echoed the next time in 1958, as well as in 1984, when other unknown soldiers were brought home. This is a beautiful colorized photo where in the very corner you get to see General John J. Pershing, the general that probably sent this young man into battle at some point and was there to welcome him home in a very honorable fashion. The unknown soldiers taken by Caisson from the 3rd Cavalry Regiment up to the U.S. Capitol, where he lays in state. And during this time, dignitaries as well as the president pay tribute to the unknown soldier, and then the doors are opened up for the general public, as well as the veterans of the conflict, to come in and pay their respects. And this included thousands of Gold Star mothers who had lost their sons and were still big question marks about where their young men were buried or if they had been recovered. On November 11th, the unknown soldier is taken into Arlington National Cemetery, where the president gives quite the eulogy. And I would always recommend that you Google President Harding's speech on November 11th, 1921, to hear what he had to say, especially when he's talking about the anguish of the Gold Star mothers, not knowing if this is their son in the casket that the nation is paying honors to. From there, the unknown soldier is carried outside of the Memorial Amphitheater, which is in this location, down to where his final resting place is. This is a great photo that shows the plaza of the Memorial Amphitheater in the configuration it was in 1921, which is different than what it looks like today. If you've ever been to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, you'll know that where the tomb is here in the center, all of this is a set of stairs that leads down to a fountain. And at the time, you can see there's thousands of people that are in attendance, because there's no graves in and around that area at the time. The unknown soldier is finally laid to rest. And then, kind of interestingly enough, people seem to forget about the unknown soldier. They forget why he was designated, what he represents, and what he meant to so many thousands of Americans. And in this photo, which is the current photo of the tomb, right here at this breakaway point on the marble, everywhere down from there is the original Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And underneath that is where the unknown soldier lays in rest atop of some French soil. Everything that was built up after this was because when people would come down into Arlington, they would stand on top of the grave to get a better view of the city. They would have their picnic on there, or they just were unaware of what they were standing around and seeing. So as this is a great vista point, and floral tributes were used during wreath ceremonies, the general public just didn't understand what it was. And veterans of the conflict went down to the government and they said, look, this needs to be changed. You need to do something so people stop using this as a picnic point. And Congress directed that the tomb be completed. They detailed some money, I think it's $50,000 to complete that. And the marble that was used to top off the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier actually came from a Colorado quarry. And it's the same marble that's used in the Lincoln Memorial. Part of the design of the finished Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is the front face, or the east face of the tomb, which has three figures representing peace, victory, and valor. This is the section that most of the public doesn't get a chance to see, just because the long set of stairs are right there and no one gets a chance to get up close to it. This is the side that most of the public sees. It's the very iconic west face of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which has the words, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier, known but to God." Well, after the completion of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, we get into World War II, and the veterans from that conflict wanted an unknown soldier to represent their fallen and missing, and plans were started to do that, but then the Korean conflict kicked off in 1950, so those were put on hold until that was completed. In around 1958, the plans were taken out again, and they decided that they were going to do what's called a double internment of both the World War II and Korean unknown soldiers. And they followed the same process as in 1921. So in this case, you have, for World War II, two large theaters of operation. You have the Pacific Theater and you have the Atlantic Theater. And this kind of shows the complexity of how they brought together these two different theaters to make a final selection. So just like in World War I, and we'll start on the Pacific side over here, a group of candidates were chosen from various cemeteries throughout the Pacific Theater of Operation. They were brought to Hawaii, and a final selection for the Trans-Pacific candidate was made. At the same time, in France, they took 13 unknown candidates from various cemeteries throughout the European Theater of Operation, including North Africa, to make a final selection in France. And then from there, that unknown candidate was moved to Naples. While this was going on, again, back in Hawaii, the Korean unknown soldier was selected. So to get the Trans-Pacific and the Korean unknown soldier from Hawaii, they flew on US Navy aircraft to Cuba. And from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, placed aboard the USS Boston, which made its way to a rendezvous point about 30 some odd miles off of the US coast. At the same time, over in Naples, Italy, the unknown soldiers placed aboard the USS Blandy, and then it makes its way across to the rendezvous point. And then coming out of Norfolk, Virginia, is the USS Canberra, which is the ship that the unknown soldier would, for World War II, would be finally selected on. So these are some of the photos of the selection ceremonies. This is in France. And then this is the Korean War unknown soldier being selected in the Punch Bowl in Hawaii. Once they got all the candidates and the unknown soldiers from Korea into one location at sea, then they had to transfer them from their various ships to the USS Canberra, which is a pretty amazing feat. You think back towards 1921 when Captain Wyman was worried about just losing the ship and the unknown soldier. Here you've got two large naval vessels at sea moving in relatively rough waters, transferring caskets of unknown soldiers and candidates, and hoping that nothing breaks during the whole process. But they successfully do that, and the Navy's very good at their operations, and they place the two unknown candidates on the fantail again of the USS Canberra, and the candidates from one of the theaters is on this side and from one on this side. We don't know which theater is on either side. And in the center is the Korean War unknown soldier, which has already been selected. Hospitalman First Class William R. Charette makes the final selection for the World War II unknown soldier. And unlike all of the other times when we've had candidates that weren't selected that were taken back to an American cemetery and reburied, this is the one time where that candidate is buried at sea using full naval traditions. So it's a little break from tradition from 1921 and all the other times that candidates were reburied. From here, the USS Blandy takes the World War II and Korean War unknown soldiers up the Potomac, arriving at the Navy Yard in May of 1958. And in this photo, you can see the unknown soldier from World War II is already on American soil, and the Korean War unknown soldier is just coming down the gangplank. They followed the same process by going up to the US Capitol, where they lay in state. And from the US Capitol, they went into Arlington National Cemetery, where the President of the United States, just like in 1921, conferred upon them the Medal of Honor. From this location, they went to the West Plaza of the Tomb of the Unknown, I'm sorry, the East Plaza of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and were buried in their own separate crypts. So that one photo that I showed you at the very beginning of this set of slides had the workers digging out the crypts there. It's very interesting to point out that each of the soldiers are buried in their own separate location, but the entire area is actually called the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. In this case, you have the World War II unknown soldier and then the Korean War unknown soldier. And as the soldiers fold up the flag, they have to present them usually to a family member. If you've ever been part of a military funeral or seen it on TV, you'll know that that's what happens. But in the case of each of the unknown soldiers, there is no family. So the President of the United States, or in the case of the Korean War unknown soldier, the Vice President of the United States, they step in and act on behalf of the families of the fallen and missing in accepting those internment flags. So by the end of May, this is what the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier looked like, with individual graves for World War I to the right, World War II, and to the left, the Korean War unknown soldier. And it's also interesting to note that the chains, which have now since moved further down the steps, were a lot closer back in those timeframes. In 1984, the Vietnam War veterans had wanted something very similar, with an unknown soldier being designated from their conflict. By now, DNA technology had caught up to us, and they were able to successfully identify most of the remains that were being recovered from the Vietnam War. There was one set of remains that wasn't identified, and Sergeant Major Alan Kellogg of the Marine Corps makes this final selection at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii in May of 1984. I strongly recommend that you Google Colonel Patricia Blase to find out about the efforts of the family went through to identify the Vietnam unknown soldier and bring their young son home. But in 1984, he was still unknown, and the USS Bruton is actually the ship that transported this unknown soldier from Hawaii to California, arriving at the Alameda Naval Air Station, where the unknown soldier is then transferred to Travis Air Force Base, and he spent the night under the watchful eye of a Joint Armed Forces honor guard, and then flew by C-141 Starlifter from Travis Air Force Base to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. And obviously didn't go to the Naval Yard in this, but still followed the same steps by going to the US Capitol, where he lay in state. By now, the Memorial Bridge had been fully completed, so he went down into Arlington via that bridge, where President Reagan conferred upon the unknown soldier the Medal of Honor. And then he was taken onto the plaza of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and he was buried between the World War II and the Korean War unknown soldiers. It was during my time frame in 1998, when I was a relief commander, that the Vietnam unknown soldier was disinterred and later identified as Captain Michael Blase of the United States Air Force. The crypt cover, where the unknown soldier had laid for 14 years, was changed. Instead of just having the conflict dates on the crypt cover, in the inscription now reads something to the effect of honoring and keeping faith with America's missing service members. And that crypt remains empty, but the spirit of that unknown soldier still lies within. And the tomb itself is the location where so many of our families that don't have the closure can come to pay respects to their loved ones, even though they may not be at that location. The Old Guard, the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, is currently the Army unit that has the responsibility to provide the Tomb Guard platoon. And this is following a very long line of different Army units that perform this duty. So in 1921, there was no guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It wasn't until 1925 that a civilian guard was posted during the hours that the cemetery was open, and that changed in March of 1926 to when one of the first military guards was posted. But again, only during the time that the cemetery was open. The 24-hour guard that we know about it today didn't actually take place until midnight to July 1937. And then the old guard took over the right to guard the unknown soldiers in April of 1948 and have held that duty ever since. To become a member of the Tomb Guard platoon, you have to fit into one of our reliefs, which are broken down by height so that everyone looks uniform. You have to go through a very intense training cycle that during my time, it was about a 90% rate where people just didn't meet the standards that we were looking for. And part of that is just learning how to do your uniforms, learning how to actually perform your guard duty because it is an active military post, as well as the various ceremonies that occur at the tomb, and then a lot of knowledge about the unknown soldiers, Arlington, and the Army. A lot of the things that we go through when it comes to the uniforms have been handed down to us generations of tomb guards. The shoes are just black leather shoes that we shine to perfection, using the same techniques as in the 50s. We have our own steam press down in the quarters, and the new sergeant of the guard has put in an industrial sewing machine so we can take care of hemming our pants and fixing things that need to be fixed on our uniforms. The Sentinels work on the equipment themselves down inside the quarters, whether it's shining the brass of the metals on their uniforms or putting together brand new bayonets or scabbards or things such as that. Once you've mastered your uniform, then you have to start learning the actual guard posts. As a relief commander, it was my job to inspect the sentinel that was being posted, as well as learn the other different ceremonies. You have individual wreath ceremonies that can occur up there and have since 1921, as well as presidential or foreign heads of state wreath ceremonies that we conduct on the plaza. The Tomb Guard Identification Badge is one of the least awarded badges in the Army. And it is something that takes a lot of hard work to attain. And you, like I said, usually about 7 to 12 months of training before you can earn the right to test for this and hopefully pass. And it incorporates a lot of what we see down at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. On the outside of this is the inverted wreath, which there's 6 of those on the tomb itself. You have the 3 figures of peace, victory, and valor in the center there, as the words honor guard mounted on the bottom of the tomb itself. There's a lot going on. I know that we're working with the Independence Seaport Museum on various projects, so you can always stay up to date by visiting us on our social media platforms like Facebook, just by typing in Society of the Honor Guard, or obviously going to our website, which is simple of tombguard.org, and then just look for the Centennial tab and you'll be able to see some of the latest things that are going on. Some key dates that are coming up later on this year are ceremonies overseas in France on both October 24th and 25th, where we mark the 100th anniversary of not only the selection of the World War I unknown soldier, but his departure from France aboard the USS Olympia. The USS Olympia will be holding a ceremony on October 25th aboard the ship. And then later on in the year, on November 9th, we will have a joint naval symposium at the Navy Yard, as well as a small ceremony again aboard the USS Olympia. And then on November 9th and 10th, the public will be allowed to come into the chains of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and lay flowers at the base, or I'm sorry, right here along the edge of the crypts themselves, which kind of mirrors something that happened in 1921, as well as 58 and 84, where the public came into the rotunda of the Capitol and paid their respects. Here we proposed to Arlington, and thankfully they've taken it on, that the public be allowed onto the plaza to pay their respects. So this is one of those special things that won't ever happen again, and hopefully we'll be able to partake in that. Things that a lot of communities are doing to support the centennial in this national commemoration are creating a national salute on November 11th within their individual communities. And all we're asking for a simple ceremony is something like ringing bells 21 times, pausing in a moment of silence, and then playing taps at 11 o'clock on November 11th. If you want to do something a little earlier than that, you can always plant a never forget garden, whether it's individually or as an organization. There's many ways that you can express your remembrance and honor for those within your family and your community that have passed on. And a garden is a very simple way of doing that. That kind of ends it, Alexis. So I think if you've got some questions, we'll go ahead and open up to that. I'll stop sharing so that you can do that. There we go. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody, I don't see any questions yet in the Q&A or the chat, but if anybody has any questions from the presentation, please feel free to enter them, and I can relay them to Gavin.
Not a problem. Getting good at this.
You leave them speechless, but they don't
well,
have
there's so
questions.
much. Yeah, there's so much to the history of this that we haven't even scratched. I mean, we could sit here for hours talking about a lot more of the finer details, especially around the USS Olympia and what occurred on this difficult journey home. And I strongly recommend everybody takes the opportunity to visit not only your website, but ours to get more of that information. And then you're opening up to the public soon. So hopefully you get a chance to actually go aboard the Olympia and stand right around where the unknown soldier lay.
So we have a question saying, I missed the first part. Do all countries have an unknown soldier, and why did we start?
Great question. I can't answer if all countries do, but I know there are a lot of countries that do have unknown soldiers. Off the top of my head, I know obviously England, France, Australia, Italy, Romania, Baghdad or Iraq. I'm sure there's more and I'm missing them. I apologize, but yes. And every country does it. Oh, Canada. Every country does it for a certain reason, and most likely to honor all of the soldiers that either didn't come home or are laying in unknown graves wherever they are. It's a way to bring a focal point to all of those families that are still grieving and don't have a place to actually visit their loved one. That unknown soldier represents that family. It represents the fallen from that conflict and gives that family truly a sense of peace, knowing that they're, in the case of the United States, that their unknown soldier or their loved one is watched over 24 hours a day. We're the only country that does a 24-hour watch. Other countries do provide guards, but very specific times. We're the only ones that do a 24-hour watch. So we know that, and we've been told as tomb guards many times, family members have asked us or told us that you're watching over my son, my father, my brother, whatever it might be, because they believe that that's their loved one. And you know what we do? We stand over watch of their loved one, no matter where they are in the world.
I actually read a couple years ago, I believe with the unknown soldier from England, I think it started with Queen Elizabeth II, but after she was married, she put her flowers on the where the unknown is buried in Westminster Abbey to show respect. Mm-hmm. And then that is a tradition that all royal brides since her have continued to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because their unknown warrior, as they call him, is buried inside the Abbey. And if you've ever had the opportunity to go to the Abbey, there's kings and queens that are buried on the ground inside the Abbey, and you can literally walk across the grave of a king. The unknown warrior is one that you cannot walk across. They hold them in such a high regard because it's a common citizen of England. But yes, the queen, after her marriage, laid her bouquet or bridal bouquet there, and that tradition has followed since.
Well, there don't seem to be any other questions.
Okay.
So wrap it up. Thank you, Gavin, for doing this presentation. Always love. Yeah. I always find something new to learn every time I hear it.
Yeah, and one of these days when we can actually spend a couple hours sitting there talking about and going through each one, there's probably a little bit more details out there that I haven't given you. But no, it's always fun working with you and talking to you. And thank you for the opportunity on a very public, platform to talk about this. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do it either again, or we'll see you all during the, October, November timeframe.
We have one last question to end.
Yeah.
Do you have any special or monumental experiences while at the tomb?
Wow. Well, my time in 1997 to 98 was pretty special, just in the fact that, it was during my watch that the Vietnam unknown soldier was disinterred. So that is a very prominent memory of mine. I think one of my best guard changes was immediately following the unknown soldier leaving the plaza. The oncoming Sentinel and I agreed that we would do a silent guard change in memory of the Vietnam unknown soldier, because now we'd gone from guarding 4 to guarding 3. And there's certain cues that we use to let the Sentinel that's on the mat know that we're going to do a silent guard change. And so we didn't get a chance to really rehearse it, but it came off really well with our heel clicks online and everything running smoothly. And it was a good opportunity to pay tribute to the Vietnam unknown soldier, and then to the 3 that we were still standing watch over. So yeah, little things like that.
Can you talk about the guards and things they have done?
Well, that's a pretty broad question. The guards make up, I can tell you now that the regiment provides the guards. So to come into the regiment, you have to apply to go to the regiment, which is a 3-year mandatory tour. And men and women within the regiment can go down and try out for the Tomb Guard platoon. It's a specialty platoon within the regiment. So you have to, volunteer for the regiment, then volunteer to try out for the platoon. And then if you make it, then you're part of the platoon. Everybody learns at a different rate or is able to pick up the training at a different rate. And we've definitely got some great leaders and mentors that are down there, especially the current sergeant of the guard is a great leader. She's the 5th female soldier to earn the Tomb Guard identification badge. She's the first female sergeant of the guard. And she's just a fantastic soldier overall to get that position and make it through the training. So there's a lot of things that go on down in the quarters, whether it's, poking fun at the short relief, which is 3rd relief, and because I'm 1st relief, I'm the tall guy. So, things like that. It's the normal camaraderie that you have within the military. But yeah, it's an interesting platoon. It's very unique.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Oh, here, follow up. With regards to the last question, what they're interested in is the number of steps and how the rifle is held.
Sure. Well, there's about 1957, 58 timeframe that the platoon commander down there really wanted to formalize a lot of what was going on. So prior to that, when they had the mat that they walk on, the long black rubber mat, the Sentinels would just walk to either end. And so at the time, Neil Cosby, the platoon commander, wanted to refine that. And so he changed it to 21 steps. So the Sentinels do everything 21 wise, because that is the number of, the highest salute that we can provide. So they'll walk 21 steps, they'll pause for 21 seconds, they'll make our facing movement, and they always try and keep the rifle to the outside of the tomb so that it is between themselves and the crowd or the public that might be there. But those are some of the simple things that we do. It's not very, I should say, it's a challenge to learn how to walk the way they want us to walk down there. It's not just normal marching. There's some different techniques to figuring out exactly how to get a glide and not bounce as you walk, especially carrying a weapon. But those are hopefully the answers to your questions. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. As Gavin said, we are open weekends. So please consider coming with us to enjoy the weather and to see where the unknown was on his voyage home to the United States. So everybody take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.